Under legal pressure, a public high school finally allows a valedictorian to mention Christ in her commencement speech. So this is what we've come to in the United States of America, having to force free speech on a so-called public school with the threat of a major lawsuit simply to be allowed to mention the name of the Savior. So my question to you, parents, can you really call yourself a servant of Christ and continue to send your kids to these schools? Would that not be an act as foolish as a dove and as treacherous as a serpent? I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, our show is sponsored by Mike Lindell and our friends at MyPillow. Can you remember the last time you had a fantastic night of sleep before we got married? Well, if you don't have a MyPillow, then you're not going to sleep well with or without a spouse. So I'm telling you, get some MyPillows. The science is behind them. The engineering is behind them. Mike Lindell himself is a great conservative advocate for up-and-coming conservative media like us, and we want to help him sell pillows. So it's a marriage made in heaven. No, in Minnesota, where all these products are made by American workers. So when you go to mypillow.com and enter the promo code Dr. Duke, that's DRDUKE, you can get up to 66% off on your pillows and your sheets and your dog beds and your slippers and your robes and just on and on and on great products. So that's Dr. Duke, DRDUKE. Go to MyPillow, buy some really great deals up to 66% off, and we benefit, and he benefits, and the country benefits. Today we start in high school. It's June, and in June, graduation and marriages are pretty much what you got. June brides and June graduates. And so every June this happens. We have graduation speeches that are being condemned for including any mention of a speaker's Christian faith or connection to God. On the other hand, you have commencement speeches delivered by Islamic students where they're talking about, and commencement speakers who are Muslim who are talking about jihad. You've got abortion now being preached from the valedictorians as well. So these kind of double standards is where we want to stop. And so we've got a situation in Michigan where a young woman desperately wanted to mention Christ in her commencement speech. She was the valedictorian. She worked extremely hard to get there, and she gives all the glory to God. Well, administrative bullies told her that she cannot do that. This may be America, but because there are atheists and Muslims and Sikhs and Buddhists in the audience, you're not allowed to mention Jesus. Now, if they wanted to mention their religion, that's multiculturalism. But you can't do that because you'd be bullying them.
And this was happening at Hillsdale High School, and they actually reversed their decision to block said senior valedictorian Elizabeth Turner from making the reference to her faith with Jesus Christ. And according to Keisha Russell, who's the counsel for the First Liberty Institute, who helped her out, she said, "We are grateful to school officials for acting swiftly to ensure that religious students can freely exercise their right to express their faith in a graduation speech. Elizabeth is thrilled that she'll be able to celebrate her graduation without being censored. We hope that future graduates will be free from religious censorship." We know that's not going to happen.
No, it's not. And this is what they do. Many of these school administrators know that they do not have a legal leg to stand on. They can't tell a valedictorian that she can't mention her faith. There's no legal precedent for that whatsoever. It is not legal. It is unconstitutional. Court after court after court have ruled it. But they're just hoping, right? They're trying to bully these kids into backing down. And a young woman like this, who's dedicated her life to Christ, she's not going to back down. First Liberty, and thank God, by the way, for these pro bono legal organizations like First Liberty, that once they hear about this, they dash a letter off to the administration, and almost within 24 hours, the school caves because they know they would not survive the lawsuit.
Yeah, so in this instance, they had sent a letter to Hillsdale High School's principal, Amy Goldsmith, warned her basically saying, you can't censor religious expression in her speech. Point blank, boom, end sentence. And so then Goldsmith took a look at, Turner's actual speech, because she had claimed that, speaking about her faith, it's just, quote, not appropriate for a speech in a school public setting, unquote. That's where we have at the public high school.
Appropriate.
It's not appropriate.
Isn't it interesting that progressive sense of appropriation is what trumps constitutional values?
Of course it does.
The law doesn't matter. Some public school educated, teacher degree holding principal of a school gets to decide what's appropriate for her to say.
And that's the thing. So First Liberty said, we don't care what's not appropriate in your mind. What's legal is that student graduation speeches constitute private speech.
Right.
And so it's not government speech. So private speech is not subject to the Establishment Clause. That's what yeah.
The problem is
She can
nothing's
speak.
going to change until there are consequences.
Of course not.
The school gets to bully your kid. The school gets, and you wonder how, for every one young woman like this who says, I'm going forward, and Liberty gets involved and it's over with it in 24 hours, how many kids back down? How many kids who otherwise would have been willing to do that simply because principals like this give them a hard time?
And the one thing I'll say that's positive in this instance, because I like to find the positive in everything, is that we are hearing that a student even did initially want to put something into a speech and that they are fighting back against it. And we have another example of
story,
another student
also
fighting.
from Michigan.
Yeah. Michigan.
I
Who's
wonder,
governor
could
over-
this be a
Gretchen? Gretchen, how dare you?
What's evil Gretchen in her Hans and Gretel name?
I was going to say Hans and Gretel.
The witch, what are they
Yeah.
up to in Michigan there?
Well-
besides stealing elections.
Well, we have a principal of John Glenn High School in Westland, who is named Michael Weger. He tried to censor the valedictorian. And so here's First Liberty Institute. They're like the superhero, the Superman in this instance. They came along and said, you have to allow the student who, according to the principal, had a very Christianized section of her speech. Very Christianized. I don't even know what that, in his mind, what that means. But he wanted to censor that Christianized portion of Savannah Leffler's speech, and that was for senior honors night. And so she just wanted to, speak out, give glory to God, and he tisk. He didn't want that. So we have to have First Liberty Institute come on in. According to Leffler's original speech, it talked about philosophies espoused by the likes of Plato and Charles Darwin as being wrong, and then she declared that the purpose of life is to live a life devoted to Christ. Westminster Catechism number 1, the chief purpose for which man is made is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever.
Well, this administrator, Weger, he actually told her that her speech needed revision since, quote, we have students and staff who would identify as Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh, Jehovah's Witnesses, atheist, etc. We must be inclusive and respectful of their beliefs as well. So literally this administrator, this guy holds a position of incredible authority over these school kids. His attitude is that if you mention Christianity, you are slighting all those other religions. And the only way we can allow you to even consider mentioning Christianity is if you do similar shout outs to every other religion, every other cult, and every other atheist position, including, presumably, Satanists themselves.
Well, and the fact that he didn't mention Scientology or Wiccan.
Well, he did say ETC, period.
That right there is offensive to me. How dare he not include every single one of them, because you can't ever include every single one. You'll be here forever in the way of the left.
And the funny thing is that if this was a Buddhist kid talking about her Buddhist influence, then you do not have to include everything else.
It's her truth.
It's
whatever
right.
It may be.
Well, it's a minority perspective.
Whatever it may be. You must respect that.
And minority perspectives don't have to be inclusive. They're inclusive by definition, right? So Christianity always must come with an asterisk, and that asterisk must include acknowledgement of every single other faith and non-faith. Whereas even the most obscure religious cult, right? The Scientologists, for instance, if you had a Scientologist speaker, that's enough. You wouldn't have to diversify any further. Or if you want to hijack the valedictorian's mic to give a screed about aborting babies under 6 weeks old, maybe we can go to our next story.
Now, before we get to the little tease that Dr. Duke gave in the last segment, make sure you download our Freedom Project Media app. Simply search Freedom Project in your app store, then you download, and then you make sure you allow for notifications. And also, If you like listening to the audio podcast, of course you do. We're available on Apple, Google, SoundCloud, and pretty much everywhere else. So go check us out, get our podcast. And one more thing, of course, we're on Rumble and Facebook and YouTube. And that is, of course, until they ban us. So.
And it's free.
It's free.
And it gives you a way of accessing our shows without having to kneel at the altar of Facebook, right?
I will not kneel.
We will not bow.
Now we're going to move on to another high school valedictorian who, instead of giving glory to God, decides to get rid of it altogether, essentially. So she, a Texas high school valedictorian, was speaking her truth, her truth, at graduation about the war. She called it a war on abortion rights. A high school senior. Let's just listen to Lake Highlands High School valedictorian Paxton Smith.
Recently, the heartbeat bill was passed in Texas. Starting in September, there will be a ban on abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy, regardless of whether the pregnancy was a result of rape or incest. 6 weeks. That's all women get. And so before they realize, most of them don't realize that they're pregnant by 6 weeks. So before they have a chance to decide if they are emotionally, physically, and financially stable enough to carry out a full-term pregnancy, before they have the chance to decide if they can take on the responsibility of bringing another human being into the world, that decision is made for them by a stranger. A decision that will affect the rest of their lives is made by a stranger. I have dreams and hopes and ambitions. Every girl graduating today does. And we have spent our entire lives working towards our future. And without our input and without our consent, our control over that future has been stripped away from us. I am terrified that if my contraceptives fail, I am terrified that if I am raped, then my hopes and aspirations and dreams and efforts for my future will no longer matter.
This is what the left does. She's talking about how terrified. She's a young graduate, a valedictorian with her whole life in front of her, and she's terrified that if she gets pregnant or her contraceptives fail, she's only going to have 6 weeks to decide to abort that baby. This is what progressivism does to the minds of young children.
And the thing is, even in listening to the tone of her voice, it's like she's been programmed. This is the mantra of what we are to say about abortion and how abortion must be legal in all cases, because it's my truth. Well, and it's my future.
It's the logical slippery slope, right? She starts by saying, what's really a problem with banning abortions after 6 weeks is it includes rape and incest. So if you're raped or you're a victim of incest, which is statistically less than 0.001% of all pregnancies, right? Mm-hmm. If that happens, she said, then those women have no out. And notice how the gradual slipping to all abortions, right? So I think there are a lot of people who might even agree with her, right? At 6 weeks, if you're raped, if you're a victim of rape, right? That's not enough time. But that's not what her point was. Her point was, this is an assault on me. We young girls have been working all of our lives for freedom and autonomy, and now it's been taken away from us by an evil legislature.
Well, and the fact that she's talking basically about stranger danger as well. She's trying to get out of any semblance of responsibility. Right. And again, as you pointed out, she initially frames it as being rape or incest. So then you are the victim in that case. That pulls
the heartstrings, right?
So you're the victim in that case. But as you also pointed out, we know statistically the odds of that, like getting a pregnancy from that or even that happening are less than absolutely what is happening. Yes. Of her, I just want to have a good time, and oh no, my contraceptives didn't work. So she took away all responsibility. She has lost all autonomy for herself.
It's even worse than that. It's not only has she given up her autonomy, she's gone from victim to victimizer, right? She starts off by talking about rape and incest and the statistical almost impossibility of that being an issue, and then she uses that to promote all women have the right to abort their children at 1 week, 2 week, 20, 30, 40, 60 weeks, right? It doesn't matter to them. And so she goes from being victim to victimizer, right? For every one mother that's forced to have a baby based on incest, I'm not sure that even happens once a year in this country. I'm not even sure it happens. There are tens of millions of babies aborted whose lives are snuffed out by the victimizing victim, right? That's what's so scary about it. And unlike the Christian kids who are trying to talk about positive things have to get legal help to be able to do that. Not only was she allowed to do that, nobody had a problem. Can you imagine being a mom and dad in Texas, right? Coming up to sit there and watch your kid graduate from high school, and all you have to listen to instead is a 15-minute harangue about we should be allowed to murder babies at younger and younger ages. And, of course, Hollywood, politicians all across the country wrote to thank this young woman. She's now a celebrity hero for, again, demanding that babies as young as 5 weeks old, 6 weeks old, should be able to be murdered at any time during their conception, not just that narrow window.
And then you get the politicians jumping in, including Beto O'Rourke.
Beto!
He says, Paxton, thank you for having the courage of your convictions and inspiring Texas with your refusal to accept injustice as the price of participation in civic life.
Did Beto conclude his salutation with, let's go skateboarding sometime?
Weird. And then, of course, Hillary Clinton.
Oh, yes, Hillary Clinton.
She says this took guts. Thank you for not staying silent, Paxton.
The way the entire system of public education is stacked against them from the beginning, if they promote life, if they promote harmony, if they promote religion, if they promote Christian values, the entire system is skewed against them. If you want to get up there and talk about something as divisive as abortion, you become an international hero immediately.
So let's wrap this one up with going to Maine, where a parent was told that he cannot attend his daughter's high school graduation. And you're like, why? Oh, it's all because he actually opposed critical race theory being taught to the children. And so the school board's like, you can't even come on campus. This is what happened to Sean McBrearty. He's a father with 2 kids in the Cumberland, Maine School District 51. And he actually had police hand him a note, essentially, saying that he was being given a prohibitive conduct warning, informing them that he was no longer allowed on local school district property, and that he needed clearance from the district superintendent if he wanted to attend any on-campus events. So naturally, his daughter's going to graduate a couple weeks later. It's on campus. Can he go? Now, we did find out they are going to allow him to go, but the simple fact that the reason why he got banned in the first place. So it all started with this conduct warning because of this basic fight he's been having with the school board, and it's been kind of childish at times, but in many instances it's with reason. So all the way back until June of last year, this whole fight started, and Superintendent Jeff Porter claimed that McBrearty was served the warning for padlocking a huge wooden-backed billboard to a school fence without permission. So it all started with a sign of one of the school board members who was actually sitting during the national anthem or the Pledge of Allegiance. So McBrearty took a picture, put it on a sign, put it in his lawn. He knew the school board member would be driving by. She saw it. She got mad. She asked him why she was being harassed for not standing during the pledge. It started going back and forth, and ultimately we get to him being banned from campus.
It's a public school. It's a private spat between a dad who doesn't want his kid's education politicized and a bunch of non-listening school board members.
Well, the good news, at least, is that McBrearty gets to attend his daughter's graduation.
It's time now for some real education. We take a break in the final segment of every Dr. Duke show to walk away from the politicized education that your kids are getting and try to consider what school might be like if we actually studied the great thinkers and writers of human history. So we're continuing for the second week what I call the humanistic approach to education, the great minds of Western culture, and how they, in their brilliance, provide an education for kids that actually is moral, it's ethical, that gives them real knowledge to hold on to as opposed to the sort of political gaslighting that we're getting from today. So my first quote is from Galileo Galilei, the great inventor of the telescope, who said, quote, "You cannot teach a man anything. You can only help him to find it for himself. Do you see what a 180-degree difference that is from what we teach our kids? Our kids are hostages being lectured and indoctrinated by intolerant left-wing ideologues. There's no give and take. There's no critical thinking. There's no ability to dissent. Galileo's right. You cannot seriously teach a man anything. You can only help him find it to himself. And if you're not doing that, then everything else you're doing educationally is bullying and indoctrination. How about this quote from Martin Luther? Quote, "You are not only responsible for what you say, but also for what you do not say." Thank you so much, right? It's not just what you say, it's what you don't say. If you want to teach our kids about slavery, but fail to mention that slavery is an international problem, that there was slavery before America and slavery today, and that slavery is relative that way, by not including the fact that non-Western cultures held slaves, you are giving a wrong attitude to American kids who believe devoutly now that America alone is a culture of slavery. And how about the great Erasmus? We saw him last week, too, one of the great Dutch educators of all time, and one of the most famous educators in human history, who was right on about the best way to educate kids. He says, quote, "A speech comes alive only if it rises from the heart, not if it floats on the lips." So all the rhetoric in the world, all your repetitious 1619 nonsense, it's nothing if it comes from the heart. The best way to educate kids is to get them emotionally involved. And that can be done for good and for bad. And the manipulative of the progressive left here in telling these kids endless stories about the suffering that historically minority peoples have suffered over and over again. Not facts, not proof, not demographics, not historical accuracy, just playing on the heartstrings of little kids. That's how you get young valedictorians screeching about abortion rights from the pulpit, from exactly that, by emotionalizing education instead of making it critical and debatable and ultimately correct education.
Okie dokie. If you enjoy our content, please consider joining the Patriot Club. Your one-time $99 tax-deductible donation allows us to keep bringing you all of these glorious stories every day. Simply visit patriotclub.us to get signed up. That's patriotclub.us. And of course, as just our little token of appreciation, we will send you our signature tumbler. Now, before we go, let's show some love to our Patriot Club members. Today, we're giving a shout out to Paul from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Paul, thank you for supporting us.
Brats and beer cheers to our Wisconsin sponsor. Thank you, Paul. And that's our show for Freedom Project. I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.